So now into the section on things that you might need to know and some questions that you might get asked by your customers. So how long will there be two labels in store? So as I mentioned earlier, suppliers can register products to the old determination, and they can do that up until the day before this one comes into force, so up until the 31st March 2020. And registrations of units are valid for 5 years. So if a unit is registered or renewed to the old determination, they can only use the old energy rating label until they upgrade or renew to the new determination. So that means that because the registrations last for 5 years, there's a potential for us to see the old label on units in store until 2025. But we do expect that suppliers will move quickly to the new label. So customers might ask you, well, how do I work out how much this unit's going to cost me to run every year? So one of the good things with the new zone energy rating label is that it provides you an indicative energy consumption. So for each zone, it'll provide a kilowatt hour number for both cooling and heating. You can multiply, so you can add those two numbers together and then multiply by the electricity tariff. And that'll give you an indicative cost. But a really clear point to make here is that the kilowatt hour numbers that you've got should first really just be used as a comparison figure. Like as an example, if you've got one unit that says it's going to use 1,000 kilowatt hours for cooling in a year and one that says it's going to use 1,200, what that's really telling you is the one with 1,200 is going to use 20% more electricity over the course of a year, no matter how you use it, pretty much. The numbers that are presented in kilowatt hours are really only an indication. They're based on a bunch of factors, which I'll get into on the next slide. So here we've taken the total kilowatt hour number here of 1,026. We've multiplied it by 29 cents per kilowatt hour, which is an average domestic electricity tariff in Australia. And for this unit, it works out to be just under $300 a year that it'll cost a customer to run this unit, in this example, in the hot zone. So in Brisbane or Darwin, for example. So how is that annual electricity consumption figure calculated? The first thing to say is it's actually really complex, but there are three factors that go into it. So the first is the annual temperature profile in each zone. So what this is based on is a typical meteorological year file, which has basically gone, what is the temperature likely to be on average every hour of the day from the 1st of January to the 31st of December. And so that provides a pattern. As an example, we've used 3 reference files to make the ZERL. So the hot zone is based on a reference file for Rockhampton in Queensland. The average zone is based on Richmond, New South Wales, which is just in northwest Sydney. And the cold zone is based on Canberra. So these are indicative. The second point is how people use their air conditioner. So what goes into this is that at certain temperatures, people will use their air conditioners differently, but there's an assumption that, say if it's 21 degrees outside, people might be using their unit for cooling for 10% of the time. If it gets to 35 degrees outside, it's expected that 95% of the time people will be running their air conditioner for cooling. But this will change because people are people and people do things differently. And then the third factor is the electricity use by air conditioners at each temperature. So we figure this out through the registration process because units are tested at multiple points and multiple capacities to give an understanding of how much energy they're likely to use at each temperature. These 3 factors are pulled together into an algorithm, which ends up giving you an annual electricity consumption in each zone. But again, this number it can only really be used initially as a comparison between units because how people use their air conditioners is going to change. Some people will go, I'm not turning my air conditioner on until it hits 35 degrees and I'm just gonna swelter and that's fine. Other people are going, if it gets past 20 degrees, it's on full bore all the time because I don't like it. So depends how people use it. So it's really complex. We can talk more in detail about this in questions if people like. So why are there two heating capacities on the zoned energy rating label? So as I mentioned earlier, the performance of some units is impacted by cold conditions. So when it's below 5.5 degrees, you can get frosting, you can get the air conditioner coils will freeze up. So the new determination requires testing at 2 degrees, unlike the old determination where it was optional. So the 2 degree heating capacity is useful for customers in cold climates because it'll tell them if the unit's actually going to perform well at lower temperatures. So some units will have a lower heating capacity at 2 than 7, some it'll be about the same, some will be more. Generally, if you're in a cold climate, look for units that are at least as good, if not better, at 2 degrees than at 7. What this isn't giving you is an indication of how efficient the unit is running at 2 degrees, but it'll tell you how much heating it can provide.